one of the places churches fail people is that they don't address the mental, emotional, and social health of their congregants. I mean, particularly in Adventism, we'll be very concerned about physical health. But what about mental health? What about emotional health? What about how is this not tied into spiritual health? So
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Pass the Baton podcast, passing on what has been passed to us, where we talk about life, ministry, and everything in between. We have a guest here on our podcast today. I am excited to introduce Pastor Vinnie MacIsaac, and I'm just going to let him tell us a little bit about himself. So, Vinnie, tell us about yourself.
I'm Vinny, and and I'm me, and I'm here, and I'm glad to be with you. I'm a pastor at Solid Rock in Arlington, Virginia. I've been there for about 11 years. My ministry there is really sort of an interesting one because we took two sort of dying churches and had to figure out what to do about that. And so we have combined them and done something very unique for the kind of churches they were. I am married for many years because I'm an old person. I actually, I'm 52. I've in pastoral ministry is a second career for me. My first career was mental health and a mental health counselor. Um, I have a 9-year-old child who is adopted, who is the joy of our lives, and is very angry at me for being away at camp meeting. And so I'm looking forward to getting on the road tomorrow and getting back home.
So you mentioned that you didn't start off being a pastor and that you started off doing mental health or social work, I believe you had
Yep.
shared before. Why?
Why which?
How do you transition from
from mental health to a field that can cause us mental health, like pastoring?
Well, yeah. So what I always say is I didn't change professions.
Okay.
I just changed where I do it. Like what really is the difference between mental health and spiritual health? Right? They're really it's really not different. It's just a matter of the vocation, and I really believe that one of the places churches fail people is that they don't address the mental, emotional, and social health of their congregants. I mean, particularly in Adventism, we'll be very concerned about physical health. But what about mental health? What about emotional health? What about how is this not tied into spiritual health? So for me, actually, I'm Canadian. And so my wife is a nurse or was a nurse. There's quite a story there, actually. And so we came to the United States for 15 months for her to get some nursing experience in a different hospital setting. And we haven't returned yet.
It's a long 15 months, huh?
Yeah, it's over 15 years now. I was like in the 90s, man. Like I said, I'm old. But I started church planning while we were waiting for green card stuff to happen. And just had a great time doing that, and ended up going to Southern and getting my theology degree. Got picked up by Potomac Conference, and the rest is history, sort of say. Yeah, I don't know where you want to go from that.
Yeah, no, I actually want to explore that with you because I recently got my master's in biblical counseling, and I realized just how, like you mentioned, how much there is a need for mental health counseling and for just even talking about it within our churches. So I'm curious, with that background that you bring into pastoral ministry, how do you navigate those challenges, or rather, how do you pastor differently having that prior experience in mental health?
I really struggle to understand how anyone pastors without it.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with people who are dying. You're dealing with people who are having tragedies in their life. You're dealing with people who are having miscarriages. You're dealing with people who are facing all kinds of life transitions, be it entering into retirement or be it, entering into marriage. Like, I worry about even maybe some kinds of marriage counseling that goes on. Like, and I wonder if the average pastor even understands the difference between what pastoral coaching counseling is and what therapeutic counseling coaching is, and if they know where that safe line is. That keeps me awake at night. That worries me, that people who don't have those skills don't know where that line is. I have some of those skills and I don't cross that line.
Right.
I refer out when it gets close to that line, even though I have that background, because there needs to be that safety. There needs to be that barrier, because otherwise you can really do damage. And I also really am convicted that there's an artificial line from the other side, the church members side, because like, they don't necessarily want their pastor to know the truth about everything in their lives.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And is it even healthy for for some pastors? It's probably not healthy to know, right? So I think there are some lines that need to, I really wish that larger churches and, supporting organizations had on staff mental health people. So at least pastors would have that resource, that connection, so yeah, I feel pretty strongly convicted about that. And even what about the mental health of pastors? My life and my ministry have went through major crises during my pastorate, and I was very fortunate and blessed to have supportive people and a supportive leadership around me. But what about pastors who don't, and how are they going to then guide other people?
Yeah. I've gone through my own mental health struggles, and fortunate enough here in our conference, there's been support for that. When I went and addressed that, they actually referred me to a therapist and covered the cost of the therapist for 2 years.
Yeah.
And that was something that was huge because I wouldn't have been able to afford it myself. It's not necessarily, I don't think, something that's covered even under our insurance or anything like that. And so that was helpful for me. But the tools that I have to help with that were not tools that I was trained as a pastor. It was tools that I received as a patient myself,
Right.
going through and learning how to process
Right.
my own things.
Right.
But I love that this is a focus of yours. I would like to say, how do we as a church get away from the stigma around mental health with our members? Because I'm open about my struggles. I oftenly joke with a lot of my members that I need Jesus and a therapist too. So there's the spiritual that connects with the mental health aspects, because it's not just, well, you didn't pray enough, which is what I've been told. And I've even been told by leaders, like, well, you don't talk about that kind of stuff. Or if you're really, truly spiritual, you won't struggle with these type of things. How do we get past that stigma? Or how have you navigated that stigma in your own ministry, I guess?
Right. So how willing are you to live incarnationally with your members? You see, this is a big value of mine. My current church has been through, like, my wife got very sick during my pastorate where I am. She has moya disease. Which created, at age 39, her cardiac artery just shut down instantly without warning. And she went through stroke after stroke after stroke and almost died, and would have died had it not been just for a miracle chance of a neurologist who had seen moya. Moya is a very rare disease. And so I invited my congregants into my life. I let them into, they walked through my life with me. I mean, some of the nurses and doctors in my congregation were the ones that advised me in that crisis. I understand the need to keep a distance and to keep a protection, but also not to live a dual life that my congregation is not aware of, so I want them. How do people preach if they're not preaching of their own experience, or why would they anyways? There would be no power in that, right? So my life is not perfect. My family is not perfect.
Really?
I know it. I'm so deceptive, right? but I'm pretty transparent, and I'm pretty honest about who I am, and my people know who I am, and I think that allows them the freedom to also be who they are. And I celebrate if someone comes to me and says, and this has happened, recently, comes to me and says, where do I find a therapist? How do I find a quality therapist? Where do I look? Like when a member comes, it trusts me to do that, and to know that, and is not afraid to talk about that with me. That's a celebration for me, because I think it just means that I've lived in a way that I've been honest enough about where I'm at. And and sometimes I'll be like, this is the person you need to see. This is what I saw,
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure you've received some pushback when you're too authentic, or when you do talk about mental health. Talk to us about how you dealt with those kind of conversations, because Tom and myself, and as pastors, he's been very authentic about his journey experience. And we talked with Richie Halverson before about how, being authentic, sharing our struggles, sharing our stories. A lot of our members, unfortunately, aren't ready for that kind of honesty. So how do you deal with that, with the pushback that inevitably comes when you're too authentic, I suppose, or just being authentic?
Well, I think that there are some healthy lines you put in place. I mean, I can talk about brokenness without telling you what my brokenness is. I can talk about, despair without telling you what my despair is, Um, but on the other side of it, I think maybe the longevity of I've been with my church for 11 years. They've seen, for better or worse, me in HD for 11 years,
Yeah.
and, and I also think when you're willing to really live with your people, again, it goes back to being sort of incarnational. When you're there in their crisis, they're going to be there in your crisis. And I think you got to live out of that. You got to win that over. I don't get a lot of pushback. And maybe it's because I've been there so long, and maybe it's because we've been through so much together. But I don't want to believe that's the case. I want to believe that, too bad if people don't like it. like, like if I go to another church tomorrow, I don't plan to be any different than I am today.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I'm not your guy. You're not going to connect with me. That's good. There's going to always be those people anyways, right?
Yeah, and that's okay.
That is okay. Look, how are you going to teach your congregation to be healthy about these things if you're not going to be?
Yeah.
Right? So there are people who don't like parts of me. I don't like parts of them either. So what? We're still going to be in this church. We're still going to eat potluck together. I'm still going to come and visit you. My kid's still going to run up and down the hall, and you're going to still get angry. It's what are you going to do? I'm not going to hate you because you don't like something about me, I don't really worry about negative pushback that way, because I just think that you make that all up. It's the second someone's life goes into crisis, and you're willing to, as much as you wanted people to do that for you, you're willing to do that for them.
Yeah.
It's the equalizer. I mean, I have people who gave up on me, abandoned me, left the church for a while because they didn't like me. But I don't. The second they call me, they got a problem. I am who I am, right? And then this is one of the greatest joys I've had in the last few years. is people who really didn't like me for something I did early in ministry become my biggest supporters later on in ministry.
Wow.
Wow.
And I love that to be the case. Like, so when we merged the two churches together, as I was saying, we started off with two very struggling churches and merged them into a more contemporary, larger church. There were some people who were really hurt by that.
Oh yeah.
You're going
I
to
can imagine.
sell the building where I got baptized,
Wow.
and now I'm getting ready to
You
tear the
crossed some
baptistry out of
lines there.
yeah, and now I'm getting ready to tear the baptistry of the other church and remodel. Right? They're like,
Right.
you're going to take away you know, some of those people that just like they got so angry at me. I mean, they had people from other conferences calling my conference to complain about me. Like, what, who cares? I mean, like, I cared at the time, but
Yeah.
in the end, I'm just gonna keep trying to be as healthy as I can be. Terribly stressful situation. But those people love me now. Like they abandoned. They're like, we're never gonna come to this church. We hate this church. We hate what you're. Okay, like sooner or later you're gonna have a problem in your life, and you're gonna reach out to me, and I'm gonna reach back to you, and like what comes around goes around, and not always in a negative way, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes time and situations can change that. I remember one of the churches I've pastored in the past. Um, it got to the point where it was incredibly stressful for me. Like I wasn't processing
Mm-hmm.
things very well. I was just starting to become open about my own personal struggles that I've been fighting with for years. I had just opened up to my wife about my depression because I'd been hiding it from her for the first like 7 or 8 years of our marriage. And I hid behind migraines because I've got a really bad history of migraines. But sometimes I'd say I have a migraine when I was just really depressed because I didn't want to
Right.
deal with that. That was the double life that I was living, and it took me years to even open up to my wife about that. And there was some real like, oh wait, this guy shouldn't even be our pastor. And at one point, I'd had enough, and I asked the conference, I said, "Listen, I can't continue to pastor here." And I called my ministerial and said, "I would rather deliver pizzas than continue in this environment because it's not healthy for me, and it's not healthy for the church because of the resentment I'm starting to have toward the church. So there needs to be somebody else that can come in here to guide because I felt like I'd done a lot, but I had people have been sweeping things under the rugs for years." And everybody's like, we're such a loving church. And I opened the rug and started getting the things out that had been cleaned to actually do some deep cleaning. And that caused a lot of hurt. Well, it resurfaced hurt that was already there. I didn't cause hurt. And
Sure.
at the very end, when we announced that we were going to be moving and we're going to go to another one of the ones that fought me the hardest, one of the ones that where I'm talking about every week I would come and there'd be a different letter on my desk from Ellen White. Didn't know Ellen White was still writing letters, but there was different letters on my desk from Ellen White, or whatever that was saying, listing out all these things. And I just came up and I was just open about it. I sat there and I talked about. I mean, it was one of those times where it's like I took off my coat, I came down out of the pulpit, and I sat down in front and said, "Hey, we're gonna have a frank conversation about what's going on." And came up to me later and sat there and said, "Listen, I was wrong. I was wrong." And of course, it didn't change. I still ended up leaving. But there's a breakthrough when that detractor becomes even acknowledges what they were doing, and it was something that was very therapeutic to me, and it helped me heal some of the wounds that I had received, and also some of the wounds that I probably received because of my own stubbornness. And I'm not the one that said that church was full of problems. I caused some of those problems in the way that I handled them because I'm not an overly patient person. I'm not an overly cuddly person. I don't know how else to say that. I've got a military background.
Yeah.
I pretty much say what's on my mind. I didn't grow up in the church, so I stepped on a lot of sacred tofus
Oh boy.
that I wasn't supposed to step on, that I didn't even know that existed. And there's things that I could have done better. There's things I can still do better now.
Sure.
But it was somebody coming to me and saying, sorry. That was incredibly therapeutic for me. And it was, I don't want to say it was the beginning of me starting to let some stuff go, because it would be 2 years in a hospitalization later before I really started addressing my own brokenness. And it wasn't until I was fully institutionalized. I was in a mental health hospital for nearly a week, that I really started to seek the help that I needed. But it's also where I learned some of the more boundaries too, because when I in process, the order that in processed me that's found out that I was a pastor, it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna do great here. You're gonna be able to help out everybody that's here, and it's like,
That's not why I'm here.
yeah, it's like I'm here. I'm not here
Yeah.
to I'm not here to help them. I'm here to
Yeah.
get the help that I needed. And but yeah, I love that we're being more open about that in the church. I mean, again, I still struggle with where's the boundaries of how much to share. I mean, I'm not going to stand up and say, well, this week I have sinned. Here's my list of sins. I'm not going to go up there and say that. I mean, I like what you say with the saying, well, I'm struggling in this area without going into the details. So
Hey,
anyway, I resonate a
yeah,
lot with that.
no, and I think also I would say I'm in an urban setting, and
We are very much not.
yeah,
We are definitely not
yeah,
in an
I'm
urban
in an
setting.
urban progressive setting. The congregation is progressive leaning, probably politically, although we don't talk about it, but they probably are, just based on where they live.
Yeah.
And theologically they are, and worship wise, definitely contemporary. So there. I think some of those factors do play, but I also think that like longevity matters.
Yeah.
Right. And I also tend to lead out of like, this is just kind of my style. I lead out of having some people super close where there's complete transparency. And then it resonates out from their circle to their circle to their circle. And so it sort of dissipates throughout the congregation. But during the pandemic, I was just like, I can see other people are having like serious anxiety problems. So I'm not gonna lie. I'm just gonna be like, I am too. I'm just gonna say to my core people, and I'm gonna say in a sermon, I'm gonna say, yeah, sometimes I come to work and I sit down in my office and I look at my screen and nothing happens.
I think some of us
Flashing-
can resonate with that.
flashing light on that sermon document, right? Just constantly, just that little flashing cursor. You don't even hit delete. You don't even type anything and hit delete. It just keeps flashing.
But if you do that, at times that it's happening in other people's lives, so I'm not gonna wait and just like, it's not a random thing. It's that I see what is happening in other people's lives, and I'm seeking to reflect that back. Then how are they going to condemn me for what they're also feeling? Like, we're gonna start resonating together, right? And I try to be proactive with that, and I try to warn people too. Like, I started telling people at the beginning of the year, I'm tired. I didn't stand up in front on Sabbath morning and say I'm tired,
Yeah.
but I started telling my elders I'm tired. You need to find someone who I can mentor in preaching, because I'm tired and I'm not gonna bring a sermon every single week. I'm in school. That some of you are in school. I know that, but I'm gonna tell my core people before we get to crisis where I'm at. And I'm gonna be giving them warnings, and because I want them to do the same back for me, right? So I have to be a little bit proactive, and again, I think the setting helps, the longevity helps, the fact that some of these people were by the bedside of my wife helps, and I've been, by their bedside, right? That helps. But I also just think that sometimes we're not leading transparent. Um, and again, is it chicken and egg, right? Is it we don't lead because it's not safe to lead it, or is it not safe to lead it because we don't lead it? Right? I don't know which it is, and it might be different in different places. But I just know that if Jesus puts me someplace, then someone else has to take me out. and right? So
Yeah.
then whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. If it's gonna be like some scrambled eggs, it's gonna be like some scrambled eggs.
I have like eggs in my head now.
Yes.
But something that Tom had pointed out, that he struggled to to even admit to his own wife that he had mental health issues. And I know that the people that are listening to our podcast, there's pastors, there's people within our churches, or may not even have a religious background. But how do we? I mean, from your standpoint as a mental health, formerly clinician and now as a pastor, what are some practical steps that we could take uh, to be more aware of our mental health, and uh, I guess be more, not just aware, but be able to address those issues?
I think everybody, pastor or person, needs to have a therapist like you have a general practitioner. You don't need to go, but you need to have one. Okay? Like, so I didn't see my general practitioner for 2 years because it was a pandemic and we're in an urban setting, and he's like, I'll just televisit with you.
Right.
Right? So I went and I saw him a couple weeks ago in person for the first time since the pandemic, right? And immediately he knows stuff about me because we have a long-term relationship.
Right.
If you wait until crisis to get a therapist, you're done. You're really making a mistake. You need to establish a relationship with a therapist before you're ever in crisis. They need to see the baseline. They need to see who Vinny is when he's normal, so they know when he's not. Like when I go in and see my doctor, he's like, "Hey, you're 30 pounds up. I don't even need to put you on the scale." Right? Like I want whoever's taking care of my mental health
Yeah.
to be able to do that too. You also need a friend that you can be candid with, who is not a therapist. You know, and I have some great friends like that, uh, that I can be candid with, and they can be candid with me. And I think those are two proactive things you have to do, no matter who you are. Um, yeah, you really need to establish therapists. Really, I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you work at an Amazon factory warehouse. I mean, everyone's plan, if you have medical coverage, will cover something. I'm blessed. My conference actually um, vets therapists and gives out anonymous counseling certificates that are prepaid, so that there's no back office paperwork that goes back to you. And so I always maintain, and I always tell my pastors that I work with to maintain one of those people. They'll be, I don't got any problems. Yeah, well, okay. Still, go see someone. Like I don't have cancer either, but I still go see my doctor.
Right.
You know, I don't know if people know about Celebrate Recovery, but I think though, like I don't like. I think to know where those groups are in your community is really helpful. I've tried to establish one in my local congregation, but just never been able to get to it. There's just so much behind it, but to know where those are in your community, or other support groups, be it domestic issues or substance abuse issues. I think it's part of being a healthy pastor, just to know about where those things are, you know, and yeah,
Knowing the resources.
So,
Yeah.
are there openings in your conference?
we are
Just
always looking.
No, because I just think that it's great that your conference is proactive in terms of the mental health of their staff, their pastors. Um, Kentucky, Tennessee, take note. Um, yeah, I think that's really great to have that kind of support system.
So psychologytoday.com, okay, you can go on there and you can put whatever your issues are. It's like they got a beautiful filtering system. If your issues are marital problems or addictions or attention deficit, I have attention deficit. You can check that. You can put, you've got a psychologist or a licensed counselor, and then you can put in your insurance plan. And our insurance plan there. And then you just hit the search feature. All the therapists in your area that deal with what you want to deal with, that your plan covers, will come up.
I actually didn't know that.
I didn't know either.
I learned something.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I'm learning a
awesome.
lot in here today.
I'm learning a
so
lot.
that's
I'm not just
yeah.
you know what I mean. But I kind of want to pivot here a little bit. You are also known as the internet pastor, and
Okay.
I'm so curious. Why are you known as the internet pastor?
I don't know why I am, but because I'm on the internet.
I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
I yeah, for me the internet has been about survival. So I was bringing these two really struggling unknown churches together, and I just had to figure, this is just how I work, good or bad, is, again, if Jesus puts me someplace, we're gonna keep breaking eggs until it works.
these egg metaphors.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to find something. We're gonna keep breaking glasses. We're gonna.
I'd rather break eggs in glass.
Okay. We're just gonna keep breaking things until it works. I gotta
Yeah.
figure out how I'm gonna make something work, and I'm really stubborn, and I'm just gonna keep figuring out. I'm just gonna keep going. Maybe it's like insecurity. I don't know, but I'm just gonna keep trying something till it works, because it's either got to work or Jesus is wrong, and or I'm not being faithful. Something's going on here, right?
Yeah.
Like, right? So I just started promoting my church through Facebook and through Twitter, and it just started like blowing up huge. I don't,
Wow.
We do have some really good musicians in our church, and we do very contemporary music, and it just started blowing up, and we just, by the thousands, we just started attracting people. And before the pandemic's a little bit different in DC area. It's still pretty crazy with the pandemic, unlike, I can sense here it's much different culture. But in
A
DC,
little
it's
bit. A
yeah,
little
in
bit.
DC it's still very much like lockdown. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's so nice to see people's faces. We don't see that yet in DC.
Wow.
But before that, like through the internet, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, through podcasting, through YouTube, we'd see 20 new people a week. Just they would just watch us online, and they would just start coming out to the church. And my church is like, because I've been there a while and there's trust, so they give me a budget. And we started out with like $12 a week or something, but I think before the pandemic we were averaging probably about $2,500 a year in online promotions, to draw people into the church, and it well paid off. I mean, like one week we got the last week of the year, we were behind in our tithe, and a random check came in from somebody that we didn't know, $10,000.
Wow.
We don't know most of our donors. I mean, he watches online, whatever, right?
It's the Lord.
Yes. The Lord leads them.
Well,
so.
there's some strategy.
Mhm.
So my AV team is a really talented group of people. I'm really thankful for them. And as soon as our live broadcast is over, they flip it around and send it back out so that we hit California time zone. And people start picking us up on the West Coast. They think we're live. They don't know.
It's like public admitted.
Yeah, that's fine.
We just send someone in to say Happy
Yeah.
Sabbath and online, whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I don't know how that happened. It just happened.
Wow.
That's really awesome.
It's about survival, though.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
definitely were on survival mode the last 2 years for sure.
Yeah.
I did have one last question for you before. I know we got to quit, but you mentioned that you were working on your PhD,
Demon.
a DEMA, excuse me.
Yeah.
And it's in transient leadership,
Adaptive
adaptive
leadership.
leadership. And I was very curious as to, first of all, what does that mean, adaptive leadership, and what are your goals in terms of of getting this degree? Because it's fascinating to me.
Yeah. So Todd Bolslinger who wrote Canoeing the Mountains.
Uh-huh.
He's sort of the sort of leadership guru at the moment, Presbyterian. He is my academic professor running the DMin program at Fuller, where I'm taking it. And the whole idea is it's just so jives with who I am and everything I've said here.
Yeah.
It's like things are broken. Jesus doesn't want them broken. Nobody knows how to fix them.
Right.
So let's just jump in and see what we can do. And that's the difference between what's called a technical change and an adaptive change. In a technical change, there are experts who know how to do it, and you just have to call the right expert to figure out how are you going to do this thing you want to do. But in an adaptive change, no one's done it. There is no expert. And that's what the doctor did.
Oh, wow. Trying to figure out how to do something nobody's ever done before.
So
that
can-
sounds like ministry,
That
period.
sounds like every day.
But that's what Todd's book is about,
Yeah.
like Canoeing the Mountains. It's the Lewis and Clark story about traveling west, and they thought they were going to canoe the whole way to the west coast, and they hit the Rockies.
Mm.
So what do you do when you got a canoe and you got the Rockies? You got to. It doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
you can figure out how to get around if there's but if there's not a river, you have to.
Wow.
Right? So that's the whole idea, right?
Yeah.
The whole idea is it's what I did with 2 small churches that were failing. Is what I did with the internet. It's what I did with my life. It's still my life is still an adaptive change in progress, right? It's
Yeah.
like, what do you do with broken things that don't work and no one has the fix for them? That's what it's about.
Well,
That sounds amazing, and I'm definitely looking forward to your doctoral dissertation.
yes, yes,
All
yes.
500,000 pages of it.
You want to edit? Because I can get you a preview.
Give it to him.
Yes, because I don't have any time. I have nothing but time on my hands, so.
No, but thank you, Vinny. I really appreciate you coming
Yes.
on our podcast. I just loved picking your brain, and certainly hope to have you not back on our podcast in the future. But whenever we end our podcast, we always let our guests shout out, their particular ministries, their Instagram, their Twitter, whatever. So if there's
Their
anything,
podcast.
your podcast, we'll put them in the comments. So let us know.
Yeah, so I'm not going to shout out much. I'm just going to say I do have a podcast, and my podcast is aimed at elevating the average level of theology you would find in your average sermon in the pew to a little bit higher, just a little bit on the academic side, but meant for people in the pew who are interested in growing past the average sermon. And I do that with Jonathan Martin out of Florida Conference. It is called Simply Devotion. This season, we've been looking at the historical Jesus and what is the data for the historical Jesus. Been a lot of great stuff there. My website's just simplyvinny.com. And I mean, you can just put my name in Google. They know who I am.
Because you're the internet pastor.
Yeah, the internet pastor.
You are on the internet as a pastor.
Yeah, Google does that, so.
Well, thanks again. We like to end our podcast with a prayer. So if you could pray for us, pray for our audience that are listening.
Absolutely. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for this podcast. I didn't know about it before I came here this week. I'm just so excited to hear people who are interested in what I would call an adaptive change. Finding a way to help ministry work better, leaders to work better, to encourage pastors, to encourage congregants. And Father, I would just pray that you would be in the center of everything that's happening here. That you would bless these 2 young men, that you would inspire their ministry, and that whoever listens to this today will go away, knowing that even if life isn't perfect, that's just an opportunity for Jesus to do something different. In Jesus' name, amen.